The fine was 450,000 credits. I stared at the notice, my stomach dropping through the floor of my tiny apartment in New Terra's commercial district. How could parking in the wrong sector of the intergalactic transport hub possibly cost this much? It was more than I made in 6 months as a junior engineer. I'd only been off Earth for 2 years, and already I was drowning in debt on a planet I barely understood. Payment due within 30 standard rotations. The holographic notice flickered, the alien script translating to English before my eyes. Failure to comply will result in mandatory labor service of no less than 5 Terra years. 5 years of breaking rocks on some godforsaken asteroid mining colony? No thank you. I had to find another way. My name is Alex Tran, and this is how I accidentally married an alien princess to pay off a parking ticket, and somehow ended up leading a rebellion against a military coup that threatened to destroy an entire civilization. I should probably back up a bit. New Terra, despite its welcoming name, isn't particularly hospitable to Earth immigrants in the year 2285. We're the newcomers to the galactic community, still finding our footing among species that have been traveling between stars for millennia. Most of us work the jobs no one else wants, sending credits back to our families on an increasingly crowded and resource-depleted Earth. I was one of the lucky ones. My engineering degree from MIT actually meant something here, and I'd landed a decent position maintaining atmospheric regulators. Not glamorous, but it paid enough for a tiny apartment in the immigrant quarter and occasional nights out at the handful of human-friendly establishments. Or it would have, if not for that damn parking ticket. There has to be some kind of appeal process, I muttered, pacing my 12 by 12 living space. My AI assistant, a bargain bin model I'd named Penny, flickered to life on my wrist communicator. "Searching galactic legal databases," she chirped, her holographic form spinning in a loading animation. "No appeals process found for violations in Sector 7G of the New Terra Interplanetary Transport Authority. However, there is a marriage exemption clause." I stopped pacing. "Oh, what now?" "Clause 459B of the Interplanetary Code. All outstanding debts to any governing authority may be transferred to a spouse of royal lineage from any recognized galactic kingdom, should said spouse willingly accept the burden." I laughed. "Great. So I just need to find an alien prince or princess willing to marry me and take on my debt. Problem solved." Penny's avatar shrugged. "The clause appears to be an ancient diplomatic provision, rarely invoked. However, it remains valid under current law." "Fantastic," I sighed, collapsing onto my sleep pod. "I'll just head to the Royal Wedding Agency tomorrow." I was being sarcastic, of course, but the universe has a strange sense of humor. The next day, I was taking my usual shortcut through the Central Plaza when I saw the commotion. A royal procession, not uncommon in New Terra, which served as a neutral meeting ground for various alien dignitaries. The plaza was packed with onlookers from a dozen different species, all watching as a group of tall, elegant humanoids with iridescent skin processed toward the diplomatic tower. "The royal family of Zalinthia," someone whispered nearby. "They rarely leave their home system." I paused for a moment to watch, mostly because their security detail was blocking my path to work. That's when I saw her. Even among her own kind, Princess Yalara stood out. Her skin shimmered like mother of pearl in the morning light, catching and refracting New Terra's twin suns. She moved with a grace that seemed almost impossible, as if gravity itself made exceptions for her. But it was her eyes that caught me, solid silver, with no visible pupil, yet somehow expressive in ways I couldn't comprehend. Those eyes scanned the crowd, and then locked directly on me. I froze. There was no way she was looking at me, right? Just some random human engineer in worn work clothes? But she was. And she was smiling. Before I could process what was happening, she had broken formation and was gliding toward me, her attendants scrambling to follow. The crowd parted, murmurs rising as she approached. "You," she said, her voice musical and strangely accented. The translator implant behind my ear struggled to keep up. "You are perfect." What?" I stammered eloquently. She extended a six-fingered hand, her skin casting rainbow patterns on my face. "I am Princess Yalara of the royal house of Zalinthia, and you shall be my husband." The crowd gasped. I'm pretty sure I did too. There must be some mistake. I managed. "I'm just Alex. Alex Tran. I fix air scrubbers." Her silver eyes studied me with unnerving intensity. "No mistake. The celestial alignment is clear. You are the one who will balance the royal bloodline." One of her advisors, a severe-looking male with deep blue skin, leaned in and whispered urgently in her ear. She waved him away impatiently. "Do you accept my proposal?" she asked, as casually as if asking whether I wanted coffee. "I don't even know you," I protested, increasingly aware of the hundreds of eyes watching this bizarre encounter. She tilted her head, puzzled. "Is knowledge a prerequisite for your species' mating rituals? Fascinating." The advisor hissed something that sounded disapproving. The princess ignored him. "Perhaps this will help your decision," she continued, producing a small, crystalline device from the folds of her flowing garment. She tapped it twice, and a holographic display appeared between us. On it was my parking violation notice, complete with the astronomical fine. My jaw dropped. "How did you—" "Our systems are integrated with all planetary authorities," she explained smoothly. "As my consort, this debt would become the responsibility of the royal house. It would be erased." I stared at her, then at the notice, then back at her. Was this actually happening? Was an alien princess offering to marry me and wipe out my debt in one fell swoop? "There is, of course, the matter of royal duties," she added. "But those can be discussed after the ceremony." "Ceremony? What ceremony?" She gestured to the diplomatic tower. "The one scheduled for this afternoon. I had a vision you would be here today. The arrangements have already been made." This was insane. Completely, utterly insane. I should say no. I should walk away, find some other way to pay the fine. But 5 years of asteroid mining. "What exactly would these royal duties entail?" I asked cautiously. Her smile widened, revealing teeth that gleamed like polished silver. "Nothing beyond your capabilities. I assure you. Merely attendance at certain functions, participation in a few rituals, and eventually, producing heirs to the throne." I choked on air at that last part. "Heirs? I'm not sure that's even biologically possible." "Our genetic scientists have confirmed compatibility," she interrupted smoothly. "The details are trivial." The advisor was practically vibrating with disapproval now, but maintained his silence. I should say no. This was clearly some kind of trap, or joke, or bizarre alien experiment. No one gets married to a stranger to pay off a parking ticket. But then again, she was beautiful, in an otherworldly way. And royal life had to be better than my current situation. Right? At the very least. I'd have a story no other human could top. "If I agree," I said slowly, "what happens after? Can I leave if things don't work out?" "The marriage bond is permanent under Zalinthian law," she replied. "But accommodations can be made for your comfort. You would want for nothing material. A permanent marriage to an alien princess I'd just met." This was madness. "I'll do it," I heard myself say. The princess clapped her hands together in apparent delight. "Excellent! The stars align as predicted. Come, we must prepare you." And just like that, I was whisked away by her entourage, leaving behind my old life with nothing but the clothes on my back, and a growing sense that I'd made either the best or worst decision of my life. The wedding ceremony was a blur. I was dressed in ceremonial robes that seemed to shift colors with my mood, positioned in front of some kind of crystalline altar, and instructed to repeat phrases in a language my translator couldn't fully process. Princess Yalara, my bride, stood opposite me, serene and regal, while various important-looking Zalinthians watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The most hostile was the advisor I'd noticed earlier, who I later learned was named Valen, the royal chancellor. Throughout the ceremony, his eyes never left me, cold and calculating. I had the distinct impression he was imagining creative ways to make me disappear. When it was over, I had a ceremonial mark on my palm that glowed with a faint blue light, a marriage certificate I couldn't read, and a princess wife who seemed pleased with the whole arrangement. "Now we return to Zalinthia," she announced as we exited the diplomatic tower. "Your belongings will be collected and sent after us." "Wait, we're leaving now? Today? I have a job. I need to give notice." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Your Earth concerns are so quaint. All necessary communications have been handled. Your employer has been compensated for the inconvenience." A sleek spacecraft waited nearby, its hull shimmering with the same iridescent quality as Zalinthian skin. As we approached, a ramp extended downward, and Yalara gestured for me to follow her aboard. I hesitated only briefly before stepping into my new life, leaving behind the familiar struggles of New Terra for the unknown challenges of alien royalty. The journey to Zalinthia took 3 days by their measure, though it was hard to track time in the windowless luxury cabin I'd been assigned. I saw little of Yalara during the trip. Apparently, royal newlyweds weren't expected to spend their honeymoon together. Instead, I was attended by servants who seemed uncertain how to treat this strange human who had suddenly become their prince consort. I tried to use the time to learn about my new home. Zalinthia, I discovered through the ship's information systems, was a desert planet with vast underground water reserves that supported its civilization. The royal family had ruled for thousands of years from a floating palace that migrated with the seasons, staying above the worst of the sandstorms that ravaged the surface. The Zalinthians themselves were descended from aquatic ancestors who had gradually adapted to land over millions of years. Their iridescent skin contained moisture-retaining properties that helped them survive in their harsh environment. They were known throughout the galaxy for their technological innovations and diplomatic neutrality, a Switzerland of the stars. What the database didn't tell me, but I would soon learn, was that beneath this peaceful exterior lay deep political divisions and simmering resentment. When we finally arrived, I got my first glimpse of the palace as our ship approached. It was breathtaking, a massive structure of crystal and metal that hovered 1,000 feet above the desert surface, capturing and refracting sunlight in dazzling patterns. Surrounding it were smaller floating structures connected by bridges that seemed to be made of pure light. "Welcome to your new home," Yalara said, appearing beside me as I gaped at the view. It was the first time we'd spoken since leaving New Terra. "It's incredible," I managed. "The palace has stood for 10,000 years, she said proudly. "The technology that keeps it aloft is our most guarded secret." Our ship docked at a private hangar, and we were escorted through gleaming corridors by stone-faced guards, whose skin was darker, almost black compared to the royal family's pearlescent hue. I noticed they all wore the same insignia, a stylized star with 7 points. "The Royal Guard," Yalara explained, following my gaze. "Led by General Korvax, our military commander. You'll meet him at tonight's reception." The mention of a reception sent a wave of anxiety through me. I was about to be presented to an entire alien court as their princess's new husband. What if I embarrassed myself? What if they rejected me outright? My concerns must have shown on my face, because Yalara placed a cool hand on my arm. "You need not worry. They will accept you because I have chosen you." Her confidence was reassuring, but as I would soon discover, wildly optimistic. The reception was held in a vast chamber, with walls that seemed to be made of flowing water, somehow contained without glass. Hundreds of Zalinthians in elaborate attire milled about, their skin creating a hypnotic light show as they moved. I stood beside Yalara on a raised platform, trying not to fidget as she introduced me in their language, which my translator rendered in fragments. Husband chosen by the celestial signs, bridge between our worlds, new era of prosperity. The crowd's reaction was mixed at best. Many simply stared in open curiosity. Some nodded politely. Others made no attempt to hide their disapproval, turning away or making gestures I couldn't interpret, but was pretty sure weren't complimentary. One figure in particular caught my attention. A younger male Zalinthian with features similar to Yalara's, watching me with intense, silver eyes from across the room. Unlike the others, he neither approached nor turned away, just observed with unsettling focus. "My brother, Prince Emil," Yalara murmured, following my gaze. "He had hoped to influence my choice of consort. He will adjust in time." Great. An alien brother-in-law with a grudge. Just what I needed. After the formal introduction, guests approached to offer congratulations that ranged from seemingly sincere to obviously forced. I smiled and nodded, letting Yalara handle most of the conversation since my translator struggled with their complex language. Then, a hush fell over the gathering as a tall, imposing figure approached. His skin was not iridescent, but a deep, matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He moved with military precision, and the crowd parted before him like water around a stone. "General Korvax," Yalara said, her voice carefully neutral. "How kind of you to attend." The general bowed stiffly. "Your Highness, I would not miss such a momentous occasion." His eyes, red as embers, turned to me. "So this is the human who has captured your interest." I tried to stand taller under his scrutiny. "Alex Tran," I said, extending my hand before remembering that Zalinthians didn't shake hands. I awkwardly lowered it again. "How primitive," Korvax remarked, not bothering to hide his disdain. "And what qualities does this creature possess that make him worthy of royal alliance?" Before I could stammer out a response, Yalara interjected smoothly. "The qualities I require in a consort are my concern alone, General. But rest assured, Alex possesses all of them in abundance." Korvax's expression didn't change, but the temperature around him seemed to drop several degrees. "Of course, Your Highness, I merely express the curiosity of many loyal subjects. Such an unprecedented choice demands explanation." "And they shall have one, when the time is right," she replied coolly. "For now, it is enough that the celestial signs have spoken." The general's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "As you wish, though some might question placing the future of our kingdom in the hands of celestial superstition and alien hands." With that parting shot, he bowed again and withdrew. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Is he always that charming, or is it just me?" I whispered to Yalara. A hint of a smile touched her lips. "General Korvax has served the throne loyally for many years, but he has strong opinions about tradition and bloodlines. Pay him no mind." Easy for her to say. The look in his eyes had made it very clear. I had just made a powerful enemy. The reception seemed to last forever. But finally, Yalara announced our departure. We were escorted to the royal apartments, a suite of rooms larger than my entire apartment building back on New Terra. Servants appeared to help me change out of my ceremonial clothes into more comfortable attire, then discreetly vanished. I stood awkwardly in the center of a room with a ceiling that seemed to display the actual night sky above the palace, complete with unfamiliar stars and 3 small moons. "So," I began, turning to Yalara, "about those royal duties you mentioned." She tilted her head. "Your training will begin tomorrow. For tonight, you should rest. The transition to our atmosphere and gravity can be taxing for humans." Now that she mentioned it, I did feel slightly lightheaded, though whether from the different environmental conditions or the sheer absurdity of my situation was hard to tell. "And the, sleeping arrangements?" I asked, trying to sound casual. We were married, after all. But this was hardly a love match. "Your chambers are through that doorway," she said, gesturing to an archway that seemed to be made of living plants. "Mine are adjacent. Should you require anything, the servants are available at any hour." I nodded, relieved and slightly disappointed at the same time. "Right. Well, good night, then. Your Highness? Princess. What should I call you now that we're, married?" She considered this. "In private, you may call me Yalara. In public, my princess is appropriate." "And what will you call me?" Her silver eyes studied me with that unnerving intensity again. "Alex," she said simply. "It is a good name, strong." With that, she glided to her own chambers, leaving me alone in an alien palace, married to a princess I barely knew, with no idea what tomorrow would bring. I slept fitfully that night, dreams filled with desert sands and red-eyed generals. When I awoke, it took several disoriented moments to remember where I was. Sunlight streamed through what appeared to be windows, but were actually some kind of energy field that kept out the elements, while providing a crystal-clear view of the desert far below. A servant appeared almost immediately, as if sensing I was awake. He was younger than most I'd seen, with skin that had a bluish tint, rather than the pearlescent quality of the royal family. "Good morning, consort," he said, bowing low. "I am Taven, assigned to your personal service. The princess instructed me to begin your orientation once you awoke." "Just Alex is fine," I said, sitting up. "And give me a minute to get dressed at least." "As you wish. Alex." He seemed uncomfortable with the informality, but complied, pointing out the bathroom facilities, thankfully compatible with human physiology, and clothing that had been prepared for me. The outfit was similar to what I'd seen male Zalinthians wearing, a fitted tunic and pants made of a material that felt like silk, but seemed to regulate temperature, keeping me perfectly comfortable despite the desert heat I could see shimmering outside. "The princess has been called to an emergency council meeting," Taven informed me as I emerged. "She asked that I show you the palace and begin your instruction in our customs." I followed him through corridors that seemed to shift and change as we walked. The crystal walls, sometimes transparent, sometimes opaque, always beautiful. Zalinthian servants and courtiers stopped to stare as we passed, some bowing stiffly, others making no effort to hide their whispers. "Not exactly a warm welcome," I muttered. Taven glanced at me. "You must understand. Your arrival was unexpected. The princess had many suitors from noble houses. Her choice of an off-worlder has caused some consternation." "Yeah, I'm getting that impression. So why did she pick me, really?" He hesitated. "It is not my place to speculate on the princess's motivations." "But you have thoughts," I pressed. Taven looked around to ensure we were alone in the corridor. "There are factions within the court. Some say the princess seeks to modernize our society, forge stronger ties with the galactic community. Others believe she simply enjoys defying expectations." He shrugged. "Perhaps both are true." Before I could question him further, we turned a corner and entered what appeared to be a massive library. Instead of books, however, the shelves held thousands of crystal orbs that glowed with inner light. "The Royal Archives," Taven announced. "Your first lesson begins here. You must learn our language." I tapped my translator implant. "I have this." He shook his head. "The translator is inadequate for court functions. Our language contains nuances that cannot be properly conveyed through electronic means. The symbolic components are particularly important. A single gesture can change the entire meaning of a phrase." Over the next several hours, Taven attempted to teach me the basics of Zalinthian communication. It was brutal. Their language wasn't just spoken, but incorporated visual elements, specific hand movements, postures, even the controlled shifting of skin color that was impossible for humans to replicate. By midday, my head was pounding and I'd mastered exactly 3 phrases, all of which I was probably mispronouncing horribly. "Perhaps we should break for the midday meal," Taven suggested, taking pity on me. I nodded gratefully, and he led me to a small dining area within the library where food had been prepared. The meal consisted of various fruits and what appeared to be some kind of fish, though Taven assured me all of it was safe for human consumption. As we ate, I tried to learn more about my new home. "So, what's the deal with General Korvax?" He seemed intense. Taven nearly choked on his food. "You should not concern yourself with political matters so soon. If I'm going to be living here, I think I should understand the dynamics at play," I countered. He sighed. "General Korvax commands our military forces and has done so with great success for many years. He is traditional in his views. He believes in the superiority of pure Zalinthian bloodlines and the importance of maintaining our independence from galactic interference. And he sees me as a threat to both those things." "Yes," Taven admitted. "But it is not only the general. Chancellor Valen shares many of his views, though he is more political in his approach. They represent a significant faction within the court that values isolation over integration." "And Yalara?" "The princess believes our future lies in greater cooperation with other worlds. She has studied extensively at the Galactic Academy and returned with ideas that many consider radical." He lowered his voice. "Some whisper she chose you specifically to make a statement, that Zalinthia must embrace change or risk stagnation." Great. I wasn't just a husband, I was a political statement, a human billboard for my wife's progressive agenda. "What about her brother, Prince Emil?" Taven's expression grew guarded. "The young prince's allegiances are fluid. He has historically aligned himself with whoever seems ascendant at court. Currently, he maintains connections with both his sister's supporters and the traditionalist faction. A political opportunist, then." "I would not presume to characterize a member of the royal family," Taven replied diplomatically. "But Prince Emil is known for his survival instincts." Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a severe-looking female Zalinthian in formal attire. She glared at Taven, who immediately stood and bowed deeply. "Chancellor Valen requires the human's presence," she announced without preamble. "You will come with me now." I glanced at Taven, who looked worried but nodded slightly. "I'll be right behind you," I assured him, though I wasn't sure what protection a servant could offer against whatever the Chancellor had planned. The woman led me through a maze of corridors to an imposing door flanked by guards. Inside was a spacious office with views of the desert in all directions. Chancellor Valen sat behind a desk that appeared to be carved from a single piece of crystal, reviewing documents on a holographic display. He didn't look up when I entered. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a chair that was slightly too small for my human frame. I sat awkwardly, waiting as he deliberately finished whatever he was reading before finally acknowledging my presence. "Alex Tran," he said, my name sounding strange in his accent. "Engineer from Earth. No noble lineage, no diplomatic training, no significant accomplishments." He looked at me with obvious disdain. "Yet now, Prince Consort to the heir of Zalinthia." "Life takes unexpected turns," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Indeed." He leaned forward. "Let us be direct, human. You are an inconvenience at best, a threat at worst. The princess's infatuation with your species has clouded her judgment. But this phase will pass." "We're legally married under your laws," I pointed out. "That seems pretty permanent." A cold smile crossed his face. "Laws can be interpreted in many ways. Marriages can be annulled. Consorts can be removed if they prove detrimental to the kingdom's interests. The threat was unmistakable. Are you threatening me, Chancellor? Merely stating facts. Your position is precarious. One misstep, one embarrassment to the crown, and you will find yourself without protection. He slid a document across the desk toward me. This is a proposal I would like you to present to the princess. I glanced at it, but the text was in Zalinthian script I couldn't read. What is it? A reasonable accommodation. You will maintain your title and privileges but remove yourself to a private estate away from court. All your material needs will be met, but you will not participate in state affairs or public functions. You want me to agree to be hidden away. I want you to recognize your limitations and act accordingly, he corrected. You are not equipped for court politics, and your presence destabilizes delicate balances that have existed for centuries. I pushed the document back toward him. I think I'll discuss any changes to my role directly with my wife. His eyes narrowed. You are making a grave error, human. I offer you comfort and safety. Others might not be so generous. Others like General Korvax, I guessed. Something flickered across Valen's face. Surprise, perhaps, that I had connected those dots. The general has his own views on how to handle anomalies. I suggest you consider my offer carefully before those views become policy. Before I could respond, the door opened, and Yalara swept in, her expression thunderous. Behind her, Taven lingered anxiously in the doorway. Chancellor, she said, her voice like ice. You were not authorized to summon my consort. Valen rose smoothly. Your Highness, I merely wish to assist in the human's orientation. There are many protocols he must learn if he is to avoid embarrassing the crown. Any such instruction will come from me or those I designate, she replied. Her skin was shifting color slightly, pulsing with what I assumed was anger. You overstep your authority. The Chancellor bowed, though the gesture seemed more mocking than respectful. As you wish, Your Highness. I meant no offense. Come, Alex, Yalara said, not acknowledging his apology. We have matters to discuss. I followed her from the room, feeling Valen's cold eyes on my back. Once we were several corridors away, Yalara stopped and turned to me. What did he say to you? She demanded. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. He suggested I might be happier living away from court, offered me a comfortable exile, basically. Her eyes flashed. And your response? I told him I'd discuss any changes with you directly. She nodded, seeming pleased. Good. The Chancellor forgets his place at times. She glanced at Taven, who had followed at a respectful distance. You were right to alert me. The servant bowed deeply. I serve the crown, Your Highness. Indeed you do. She turned back to me. Come. The council meeting has concluded, and there are things you must know. She led me to her private chambers, dismissing all servants, including Taven. Once we were alone, she activated some kind of security field that made the walls pulse briefly with blue light. Privacy measures, she explained. What I am about to tell you must not leave this room. I nodded, suddenly nervous. I'm listening. You were not chosen randomly. Alex Tran. She began pacing, her movements fluid and graceful, despite her obvious agitation. Your arrival on Zalinthia was arranged. What do you mean, arranged? You saw me in a crowd and proposed on the spot. She shook her head. That was the public narrative, yes. But I had been monitoring you for some time. The parking violation was engineered. I stared at her. You're saying you deliberately got me into debt so you could swoop in and save me? Why would you do that? Because I needed a consort from Earth, and you fit all the necessary parameters. She stopped pacing and faced me directly. Zalinthia stands at a crossroads. For generations, we have maintained our independence through careful neutrality and technological superiority. But the galaxy is changing. New powers emerge. Old alliances shift. We can no longer afford isolation. And I'm supposed to help with that. How exactly? Earth is an emerging power. Your species is adaptable, resourceful, and rapidly expanding its influence. An alliance with Earth could secure Zelinthia's position for generations to come. I laughed incredulously. I'm an engineer who fixes air scrubbers. I don't have any political connections. I can't negotiate treaties or establish diplomatic relations. Not yet, she agreed. But you are intelligent, observant, and, most importantly, unaligned with any faction at court. You have no preconceptions, no historical biases. You see things as they are, not as tradition dictates they should be. She took my hands in hers, her skin cool against mine. There is unrest in the kingdom, Alex. General Korvax and Chancellor Valen represent a faction that would rather see Zelinthia burn than change. They plot even now, gathering support among the military and noble houses. You're talking about a coup, I realized. I am talking about the future of my people, she corrected. A future that cannot be secured through isolation and xenophobia. I pulled my hands away. So I'm just a political tool, a human shield for your agenda. Her expression softened. You are more than that. The celestial signs truly did indicate you as a suitable match. That part was not fabricated. But yes, there were practical considerations as well. And what happens if your gamble doesn't pay off? If Korvax decides a human consort is reason enough to move against you? Then we will face that challenge together, she said simply. I did not choose you only for political reasons. Alex, I chose you because I believe you have the strength to stand beside me in the coming storm. I wasn't sure whether to be flattered or terrified. I'm not a soldier or a politician. I don't know how to fight a coup. You know more than you realize, she countered. Your perspective, your different way of thinking, these are weapons in themselves, and you will not be alone. She deactivated the privacy field and moved toward the door. Rest now. Tomorrow, your real training begins. As she left, I sank onto a nearby chair, my head spinning. In the space of a few days, I'd gone from a debt-ridden engineer to a prince consort caught in the middle of alien palace intrigue. And apparently, my new wife had orchestrated the whole thing. Yet, despite the manipulation, I couldn't bring myself to be angry with Yalara. There had been sincerity in her eyes when she spoke of Zelinthia's future, a genuine belief that our unlikely marriage could somehow make a difference. Besides, what choice did I have now? I was light years from Earth, married to an alien princess, with powerful enemies already plotting my removal. Running away wasn't an option. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to help Yalara achieve whatever vision she had for her kingdom, I needed to learn fast. Court politics, Zelinthian culture, maybe even how to defend myself if it came to that. Tomorrow, she had said. My real training begins tomorrow. I had a feeling it was going to be a very long day. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity, true to her word. Yalara initiated a rigorous training program that made my engineering studies back on Earth seem like kindergarten. Mornings were devoted to language and cultural instruction, where I struggled to master not only Zelinthian words, but the accompanying gestures and postures. Afternoons focused on court protocol and political history. Endless lessons on the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined the royal court. Evenings were spent in Yalara's company, discussing the day's progress and planning for the challenges ahead. To my surprise, I found myself enjoying these evening sessions. Yalara was a patient teacher, never showing frustration at my mistakes, always encouraging my questions. She had a sharp intelligence and an unexpected sense of humor that emerged when we were alone. I began to see beyond the regal exterior to the person beneath, passionate about her people, determined to lead them into a more connected future, and deeply worried about the forces aligned against her. You're making remarkable progress, she told me one evening, as we sat on a balcony overlooking the desert. The 3 moons of Zalinthia cast an ethereal light across the sand dunes, creating patterns that seemed almost alive. "Your pronunciation has improved significantly." "Thanks," I said, feeling oddly pleased by her praise. "Though I still can't do that thing with my hands during the formal greeting. Human fingers don't bend that way." She laughed. "Perhaps we should create a new greeting specifically for human Zalinthian interactions. You could establish the precedent as Prince Consort." The title still felt strange to me. "About that, am I actually supposed to be doing anything official? So far, it's just been lessons and more lessons." Her expression grew more serious. "The time for public duties will come soon enough. For now, your focus must remain on preparation." She hesitated, then added, "And there are security concerns." "Korvax," I guessed. She nodded. "The general has been unusually active lately. Military exercises have increased, and many of his loyal officers have been recalled to the palace. Chancellor Valen, too, has been holding private meetings with noble houses known for their conservative views." "They're consolidating support," I said. "The implication's clear. How much time do we have?" "Difficult to say. My brother has been monitoring their movements, but even Emiel cannot be everywhere." That surprised me. "Your brother is helping us? I thought he wasn't exactly thrilled about your choice of husband." A small smile touched her lips. "Emiel's initial reaction was predictable, but he is pragmatic above all else. He sees which way the winds are shifting and has decided his interests align with ours, at least for now." "Should I be meeting with him, forming some kind of alliance?" "In time," she agreed. "But Emiel is cautious. He will not openly declare for either faction until he is certain of the outcome." I studied her face in the moonlight, struck again by her alien beauty. In these quiet moments, it was easy to forget the precarious political situation, the fact that our marriage had been arranged for strategic purposes. Sometimes, it felt almost real. "There's something I've been wondering," I said, changing the subject. "That first day, in the plaza on New Terra, you said the celestial signs indicated I was the one. What did that mean, exactly?" She was silent for a long moment, her silver eyes reflecting the moons. "My people have always looked to the stars for guidance," she finally said. "We believe that celestial alignments can reveal truths hidden from ordinary perception. I have a particular sensitivity to these patterns." "So what, you're psychic?" She tilted her head. "Not in the way humans understand the concept. It is more an attunement to probabilities. I can sometimes sense the path with the highest likelihood of a desired outcome. And I was on that path." "Yes." Her gaze met mine. "When I saw you in the plaza, I knew with certainty that you were connected to Zalinthia's future, that our paths were meant to intersect. But you already knew who I was," I pointed out. "You had my parking ticket information." "The violation was created as a mechanism to establish contact," she admitted. "But the choice of you, specifically, that was guided by the signs. I wasn't sure I believed in celestial guidance, but I couldn't deny the strange series of events that had brought me here. Maybe there was something to her mystical perception after all." Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Taven, who approached with an apologetic bow. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Highness, but Prince Emiel requests an immediate audience with both of you." Yalara frowned. "At this hour, what is the matter?" The prince would not say, but he insisted it was urgent. She exchanged a glance with me, then nodded. "Show him in." A few minutes later, Prince Emiel strode onto the balcony. Unlike his sister, who favored flowing garments in soft colors, Emiel dressed in fitted attire with sharp lines and dark tones. His movements were precise, controlled, his expression carefully neutral as he bowed to Yalara and acknowledged me with a curt nod. "Brother," Yalara greeted him, "what brings you here at such a late hour?" Information that could not wait until morning. He glanced at Taven, who still hovered nearby. Leave us. The servant bowed and withdrew. Once he was gone, Emil activated a privacy field, similar to the one Yalara had used before. There is a traitor within your household, he said without preamble. Someone has been feeding information to Korvax about your movements, your conversations, your plans. Yalara's spine straightened. You are certain of this? I have proof. He produced a small device and set it on the table between us. It projected a holographic image of what appeared to be a communication log. These transmissions originated from within your private quarters and were received at a location known to be frequented by the General's associates. I leaned forward, studying the data. The technical specifications were familiar enough. Encrypted transmissions on a quantum frequency, bounced through multiple relays to obscure their origin and destination. Standard espionage tactics, apparently universal across species. Can you identify the source? I asked. Emil gave me a slightly surprised look, as if he hadn't expected me to understand the technical aspects. Not precisely. The signal is being masked by some form of advanced technology, but the transmission point is definitely within this wing of the palace. Who has access to these rooms? Yalara asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. Your personal servants, the royal guards assigned to your protection, and of course, the consort. Emil replied, with a pointed glance in my direction. If you're suggesting I'm the spy, you're wasting your time, I said flatly. I've barely been here a month, and I spend most of it in language lessons. Besides, who would I be reporting to? I don't exactly have connections in the Zalinthian military. I make no accusations, Emil said smoothly. I merely present the facts as I have discovered them. Yalara placed a calming hand on my arm. No one suspects you, Alex. My brother is simply being thorough. She turned to Emil. What of the content of these transmissions? Do we know what information has been compromised? Only that there have been regular communications. The encryption is formidable. An idea was forming in my mind. This technology that's masking the signal, could it be Earth-based? Something they wouldn't expect me to recognize? Emil raised an eyebrow. Possibly. Why? Because if they're using Earth tech to spy on an alien princess, thinking no one here would recognize it. I stood up, excitement building. Do you have any old Earth devices in the palace? Antiques, maybe? Or things confiscated from visitors? Yalara exchanged a glance with her brother. The Royal Museum has a collection of artifacts from various worlds, including Earth. Why? Because I'm an engineer, and I know a thing or two about jury-rigging detection systems. If they're using Earth tech, I might be able to build something to track it down. For the first time, I saw something like respect in Emil's expression. An interesting proposal. The museum is currently closed, but as Prince Consort, you have access. I'll go with him, Yalara decided, rising. If there is indeed a spy in my household, I want them found immediately. The Royal Museum occupied an entire floating structure adjacent to the main palace, connected by one of those light bridges that still made me nervous to cross. Inside, the vast collection of artifacts from across the galaxy was displayed in environmentally controlled cases, organized by planet of origin. The Earth section was smaller than I'd expected. A few pieces of technology from the early space exploration era, some cultural items, and a handful of natural specimens. But among them was exactly what I'd hoped to find: an old model communication scanner from the early days of interstellar travel. This might work, I muttered, examining the device through its protective case. It's primitive by current standards, but that's actually an advantage. Modern systems might not detect it as a threat. Can you make it functional? Yalara asked. With a few modifications, yes. I looked up at the curator who had accompanied us, an elderly Zalinthian with pale, almost translucent skin. "I need to borrow this. Royal business." The curator looked uncertain, until Yalara nodded her authorization. Then, he carefully deactivated the security field and removed the device, placing it in a containment unit for transport. "I'll also need some basic tools and possibly parts from other Earth tech," I added. "Anything with communication capabilities." By the time we returned to Yalara's quarters, I had accumulated a small collection of Earth artifacts, much to the curator's barely concealed horror. Emil had departed on other business, promising to return in the morning for an update. I set up a makeshift workshop in a corner of Yalara's receiving room, spreading the components across a table. The communication scanner was decades old, but remarkably well preserved. Its original purpose had been to detect and analyze signals from Earthships in deep space. But with some modifications, it could be repurposed to locate Earth-based transmission devices within the palace. Yalara watched with fascination as I worked, asking occasional questions about the technology. I explained as best I could while focusing on the delicate circuitry. "It's basically like tuning an old radio to a specific frequency," I said, rewiring a crucial component. Modern Zilinthian systems are looking for Zilinthian, or standard galactic transmissions. They might not be programmed to recognize obsolete Earth protocols. "And you believe the spy is using such outdated methods deliberately to avoid detection?" "It's what I would do," I admitted. "Use technology your target doesn't understand or expect. It's a classic espionage tactic." Several hours later, as Zilinthia's primary sun began to rise over the desert, I had a functioning detector. It was ugly, a cobbled-together mess of parts that would have horrified any professional engineer. But according to my tests, it worked. "Now we wait," I said, activating the device. It began a slow scan of the surrounding area, searching for the specific frequency patterns used by early Earth communication systems. "If anyone transmits using Earth tech, this should pick it up." Yalara had servants bring food and drink, and we ate while keeping an eye on the detector. She insisted I rest afterward, pointing out that I had been working through the night. I reluctantly agreed, settling onto a comfortable couch while she reviewed official documents nearby. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, I was being shaken awake by an excited Yalara. "Alex, it found something!" I bolted upright, momentarily disoriented. The detector was emitting a soft, pulsing tone, its display showing a signal detection in progress. "Where?" I asked, fully alert now despite my interrupted sleep. She pointed to the display, where a crude directional indicator was pointing toward the eastern wall of the chamber. "It appears to be coming from the servants' quarters." I grabbed the detector and followed its guidance, the signal growing stronger as we approached a specific door. Yalara summoned guards, who positioned themselves on either side as she overrode the security lock. Inside was a small room, simply furnished, clearly servant accommodations. The detector led us to a storage compartment built into the wall, where, hidden behind clothing and personal items, we found a small transmitter of unmistakably Earth origin. "That's military grade," I said, recognizing the design. 30 years old at least, but still effective. Someone modified it to interface with Zilinthian power systems. "Whose quarters are these?" Yalara demanded of the guard captain. "Tavin's, Your Highness," he replied, looking shocked. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Tavin, who had been assigned to my personal service, who had seemed so helpful and concerned. The spy had been right beside me from the beginning. "Find him," Yalara ordered, her voice cold with fury. "Search the entire palace if necessary. He cannot be allowed to escape." But Tavin was already gone. A search of the palace revealed no trace of him, and security records showed he had left through a service entrance shortly after Emil's visit the previous night. "He must have suspected we were onto him," I said, as we gathered in Yalara's chambers to discuss the situation. Emil had joined us, along with a small circle of advisors Yalara trusted implicitly. "The question is, where did he go?" And who was he working for? Korvax, Emil said confidently. The transmission patterns match known military protocols. One of the advisors, an older female Zalinthian named Senna, shook her head. We cannot be certain. Chancellor Valen has spies throughout the palace as well. This could be his work. Or they could be working together, I suggested. Korvax provides the military muscle. Valen the political cover. It would make sense. Yalara was pacing, her skin shifting through colors that reflected her agitation. Regardless of who employed him, the damage is done. We must assume they know everything. Our concerns, our plans, possibly even our suspicions about their intentions. Then perhaps it is time to act rather than react. Emil suggested. Make a public move that forces their hand, on terms favorable to us. What kind of move? I asked. He turned to me, his expression calculating. A formal presentation of the prince consort to the general public. Not just the court, but the common citizens. Show them that the princess's choice is not merely a political statement, but a genuine alliance that will benefit Zalinthia. Yalara stopped pacing. A royal procession through the city, she mused. It has been some time since the people saw their princess among them. Is that safe? I asked, concerned. If Korvax is planning something. He would not dare move against the royal family in public, Senna interjected. The common people still revere the monarchy, whatever political factions may exist at court. An open attack would turn public opinion against him immediately, and it would give us an opportunity to gauge the people's reaction to Alex. Yalara added, if they accept him, it strengthens our position. If not. She let the implication hang. When would this happen? I asked, already nervous at the prospect of facing thousands of alien citizens who might view me as an unwelcome interloper. Tomorrow, Emil decided, before they have time to plan any countermeasures. And so it was decided. The royal procession would depart from the palace at midday, traveling through the floating city that surrounded the royal residence before descending to the surface for a tour of the capital below. I would be officially presented to the people of Zalinthia as their princess's chosen consort. That night, as I tried to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Taven's betrayal had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. If someone I had begun to consider a friend could be a spy, who else might be working against us? Were we being manipulated into making a public appearance that would somehow play into our enemy's hands? But there was no backing out now. The announcements had been made, the preparations set in motion. Tomorrow, I would face the people of Zalinthia, and whatever plot Korvax and Valen might have set in motion. The morning of the procession dawned clear and hot. The twin suns of the Zalinthian system already baking the desert below the floating palace. I was dressed in formal attire, elaborate robes in royal blue and silver, the colors of the ruling house, and given a final briefing on protocol. You will remain at my side throughout, Yalara instructed, as attendants made final adjustments to our ceremonial garments. Acknowledge the crowd with the greeting gesture we practiced, but do not attempt to speak unless directly addressed by an official. Your translator will still struggle with some of the regional dialects. I nodded, trying to project a confidence I didn't feel. What about security? After Taven. My brother has personally selected the guards who will accompany us, she assured me. And additional security measures have been implemented along the entire route. The procession assembled in the grand courtyard of the palace, a flotilla of small, elegant craft designed to hover above the crowds, allowing us to be seen while maintaining a safe distance. Yalara and I would occupy the lead vessel, with Emiel and various court officials following in subsequent craft. The Royal Guard, in their distinctive black armor, surrounded the entire formation. As we prepared to depart, General Korvax appeared, resplendent in full military regalia. He bowed to Yalara with perfect correctness, though his eyes burned with the same disdain I'd noted at our first meeting. Your Highness, he said, I must protest this hasty arrangement. Proper security protocols have not been followed. The risk is unacceptable. Yalara regarded him coolly. Your concern is noted, General. However, the decision has been made. The people have a right to see their princess and her consort. At least allow me to assign additional troops along the route, he pressed. My most trusted units are standing by. That will not be necessary, Emil interjected, approaching from behind. The Royal Guard is more than capable of ensuring our safety. Korvax's jaw tightened, but he made no further argument, merely bowing again before withdrawing. I watched him go, noting the stiffness in his posture, the barely contained anger in every movement. He's planning something, I murmured to Yalara as we boarded our vessel. Undoubtedly, she agreed, but so are we. The procession departed with great ceremony, the palace shields parting to allow our small fleet to emerge into the open air. Below us stretched the floating city, a marvel of Zalinthian engineering, with hundreds of structures suspended above the desert by the same mysterious technology that kept the palace aloft. Streets made of solid light connected these buildings, crowded now with citizens eager to catch a glimpse of the royal procession. As we glided above them, I was struck by the diversity of the crowd. While most appeared to be Zalinthians, with their characteristic iridescent skin in various hues, there were also beings of other species, evidence of the interstellar trade and cultural exchange that Yalara hoped to expand. To my surprise, the reception was largely positive. There were cheers as we passed, citizens performing elaborate gestures of respect. Many seemed curious about me, pointing and discussing among themselves. But I detected little of the hostility I had feared. They do not share the court's prejudices, Yalara observed, waving graciously to the crowds. The common people are more concerned with prosperity and peace than with maintaining bloodlines. The procession wound through the floating city for over an hour before beginning its descent to the surface. This was the part I had been most anxious about, leaving the relative safety of the air for the more confined spaces of the capital city below. The transition was smooth, our vessels gliding down to join a land-based parade that had been assembled to escort us through the streets. The heat hit me immediately, far more intense on the surface than in the carefully regulated atmosphere of the floating structures. Sweat began to bead on my forehead, despite the cooling systems built into my ceremonial robes. The surface city was even more impressive up close than it had appeared from above. Massive buildings of crystal and a metal I couldn't identify rose from the desert floor, their surfaces designed to reflect sunlight and remain cool despite the harsh environment. Between them, shaded boulevards teemed with citizens, held back from the procession route by more of the Royal Guard. The oldest parts of the city date back 15,000 years, Yalara told me as we proceeded down the main avenue. Before we developed the technology to create floating structures, all of Zalinthian civilization existed here on the surface. I was about to respond when a disturbance rippled through the crowd ahead. People were scattering, shouting in alarm. The Royal Guards moved forward, weapons ready. "What's happening?" I asked, tensing. Before Yalara could answer, an explosion rocked the street ahead of us. Our vessel lurched to a stop as debris rained down from a nearby building. Through the smoke, I could see figures in black armor, similar to the Royal Guard, but with subtle differences, emerging onto the street. "Korvax's elite units!" Emil shouted from the vessel behind us. "This is a coup attempt!" More explosions followed, strategically placed to cut off retreat. Our security detail closed ranks around us, but they were clearly outnumbered by the soldiers now swarming the area. "We need to get back to the palace," Yalara said, her voice remarkably calm despite the chaos. She turned to the vessel's pilot. "Emergency ascent protocol." The pilot's hands flew over the controls, but nothing happened. "The systems are not responding, Your Highness. Something is blocking the elevation technology." A voice boomed across the square, amplified by some kind of technology. "Your Highness, surrender yourself and the alien consort, and no harm will come to you or your brother." General Korvax strode into view, flanked by heavily armed soldiers. Behind him, I could see Chancellor Valen, looking significantly less comfortable in the midst of military action, but no less determined. "You commit treason, General," Yalara called back, her voice enhanced by the vessel's communication system. "Stand down your forces immediately." "It is you who have betrayed Zalinthia," Korvax responded. "By polluting the royal bloodline, by conspiring to surrender our sovereignty to alien influences. The Council of Elders has authorized your temporary removal until this matter can be properly adjudicated." I noticed something the general apparently hadn't. While his forces had surrounded our procession, they were also hemmed in by the growing crowd of citizens. And those citizens did not look pleased by this interruption of their royal procession. "The people will never accept this coup," Yalara declared, apparently noticing the same thing. "Look around you, General. See their faces. Is this the legacy you wish to leave? Civil war?" Korvax sneered. "The people will accept what they are told to accept. They have no choice in matters of state." That was a tactical error. A murmur ran through the crowd, growing quickly into shouts of protest. The citizens of Zalinthia might revere their royal family, but they clearly did not appreciate being dismissed as irrelevant by a military commander. "We need to use this," I whispered to Yalara. "The people are on your side, not his." She nodded slightly, then addressed the crowd directly. "Citizens of Zalinthia, you witnessed today an attempt to overthrow your rightful government by force. General Korvax would replace royal authority with military dictatorship." The crowd's agitation increased, some beginning to press against the line of soldiers. Korvax shouted orders, and his troops raised weapons threateningly. I saw an opportunity and took it. Standing up in our vessel, I called out, "People of Zalinthia, I came to your world as a stranger, but I have come to admire your civilization and your princess, who works tirelessly for your benefit. Would you allow her to be deposed by those who fear progress and change?" It was a gamble. I had no idea how they would react to an alien addressing them directly. But to my relief, there were shouts of support. More importantly, the distraction allowed Emiel, who had slipped from his vessel during the confrontation, to work his way behind Korvax's position with several loyal guards. What happened next unfolded with breathtaking speed. As Korvax ordered his troops to advance on our vessel, Emiel's forces struck from behind. At the same moment, the citizens surged forward, not in a coordinated attack, but in a wave of chaotic motion that disrupted the soldiers' formation. "Now!" Yalara commanded, and our security detail moved us from the vessel into the shelter of a nearby building. From there, we had a partial view of the battle erupting in the square. Korvax's troops fighting a two-front engagement against Emiel's smaller force and the increasingly hostile crowd. "We need to get to the emergency bunker," one of the guards urged. "This way, Your Highness." We were led through a series of back alleys and service corridors, the sounds of fighting fading behind us. The bunker turned out to be a fortified structure beneath one of the oldest buildings in the city, a temple dedicated to the celestial forces that featured prominently in Zalinthian belief. Inside, we found more of the royal guard who had been positioned there as a precaution, along with communication equipment that allowed us to monitor the situation. Reports were chaotic but encouraging. The coup attempt was faltering as more citizens joined the resistance and regular military units. Confused by conflicting orders, hesitated to fire on their own people. "Emiel?" Yalara asked anxiously, scanning the reports. "The prince is alive and leading a counterattack," one of the officers reported. "He has secured the central plaza and is moving to retake the processional route." I felt a surge of admiration for Yalara's brother. Whatever his political calculations might be, he was risking his life to defend the throne. Hours passed in tense waiting. Periodically, new reports would arrive, painting a picture of a city in turmoil but gradually returning to royal control. By nightfall, the news was definitive. Korvax's coup had failed. The general himself had been captured, along with several of his key officers, though Chancellor Valen had apparently escaped in the confusion. When Emiel finally joined us in the bunker, he was bloodied but triumphant. "The city is secure," he announced, "and the floating sectors never fell. Korvax's attempt to disable the elevation technology was only partially successful." Yalara embraced her brother, relief evident in her expression. "What of the casualties?" Emil's face sobered. "Too many. 27 royal guards, perhaps 100 citizens, and an unknown number of Korvax's forces. The hospitals are overwhelmed." The weight of those deaths settled over the room. Whatever political victory had been achieved, it had come at a terrible cost. "And Korvax?" I asked. "Imprisoned in the palace security wing," Emil replied. "He maintains that he acted with authority from the Council of Elders, though several members have already denied issuing any such order." "Valen's work," Yalara surmised. "He would have forged the necessary documents." She turned to the communications officer. "Prepare an address to the people. They deserve to hear directly from their princess after today's events." Within the hour, Yalara was speaking to the citizens of Zalinthia through every available channel. Her image projected in public spaces throughout the capital and floating city. I stood beside her, silent but visible, a symbol of the change she represented. "People of Zalinthia," she began, her voice steady and resolute. "Today, we have witnessed both the darkest and brightest aspects of our society. Those sworn to protect us attempted to seize power through violence, but they were defeated not primarily by force of arms, but by your courage and loyalty." She went on to outline the events of the day, commend those who had stood against the coup, and promise justice for those responsible. Then, to my surprise, she turned to me. "Many of you have wondered about my choice of consort. Today, Alex Tran stood with us, spoke for us, risked his life for Zalinthia. He represents a future where our world does not stand alone, but takes its rightful place in a community of diverse civilizations, each contributing their unique strengths." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages of support flooding in from across the planet. Citizens gathering in plazas to cheer the royal address. Whatever doubts they might have had about an alien consort, Korvax's attempted coup had ironically solidified my position. By standing against me, he had made me a symbol of the legitimate government he sought to overthrow. In the days that followed, we returned to the palace and began the process of restoration. Korvax was tried and convicted of treason, though Yalara commuted his death sentence to permanent exile, a decision that surprised many, but demonstrated her commitment to a more moderate approach than her predecessors. Chancellor Valen remained at large, reportedly gathering supporters among the more conservative noble houses in distant provinces. He represented an ongoing threat, but one diminished by the failure of the military coup. The most significant change, however, was in my own role. No longer sequestered for language lessons and protocol training, I was now included in council meetings, consulted on matters of state, and given real responsibilities in the governance of Zalinthia. "The people responded to you," Yalara explained when I expressed surprise at my expanded duties. "They saw something in you that resonated with their own hopes and concerns. You have become a symbol of positive change." "I am an engineer, not a politician," I protested, though with less conviction than before. The events of the coup attempt had changed me too, awakened something I hadn't known existed, a capacity for leadership in crisis. "You are whatever Zalinthia needs you to be," she replied. "As am I." There was truth in that. Neither of us had chosen our roles originally. She born to royalty, me married into it through an unlikely chain of events. But we were adapting, finding ways to use our positions to effect positive change. One evening, about a month after the coup attempt, Yalara and I were reviewing plans for a new initiative to integrate immigrant communities more fully into Zalinthian society when a guard announced an unexpected visitor. "Prince Emil requests an immediate audience," the guard reported. "He says it concerns information about Chancellor Valen." We exchanged concerned glances. Since the coup, Emil had been heading the effort to track down the missing chancellor and his supporters. Any news could be significant. "Send him in," Yalara directed. Emil entered, looking troubled. "Sister, Alex, I apologize for the interruption, but this could not wait." He placed a data crystal on the table between us. "One of our agents intercepted this communication. It appears Valen has been more active than we realized." Yalara activated the crystal, and a holographic display appeared, a map of Zalinthia with several locations highlighted. "What are we looking at?" "Weapons caches," Emil explained grimly. "Valen has been stockpiling military equipment at these locations for months, possibly years, preparing for exactly the kind of situation we now face." I studied the map, noting the strategic placement of the sites. "He's surrounding the capital, creating a noose he can tighten when ready." "Precisely," Emil confirmed. "And according to our intelligence, he's nearly ready. The noble houses that support him have been quietly mobilizing their private security forces. Combined with the weapons he's gathered, they could pose a significant threat, not as direct as Korvax's attempt, but potentially more dangerous in the long run." "A siege," Yalara murmured. "He means to cut off the capital from the rest of the planet, isolate us from our supporters." "The floating city would be vulnerable," I realized. "It depends on resources from the surface. If those supply lines are cut, we could hold out for perhaps 3 standard months," Emil confirmed. "But no longer. And that assumes we can maintain control of the elevation technology. If they manage to disable it completely..." He didn't need to finish the thought. Without the technology that kept the floating structures aloft, the entire city would plummet to the surface, a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. "We need to move against these weapon caches immediately," I said, "before Valen can distribute them to his supporters." "Agreed," Yalara said. "But our military is still recovering from the purges following Korvax's coup. Many units are under strength or of questionable loyalty." "What about the immigrant quarters?" I suggested, an idea forming. "The workers from other worlds who maintain the infrastructure, staff the service industries. Many of them have military experience from their home planets. If we offered them full citizenship in exchange for service..." Emil frowned. "Arm the immigrants? The noble houses would see it as confirmation of their worst fears, that we intend to dilute Zalinthian purity with alien influence." "They already believe that," I pointed out. "Valen has been spreading that narrative since before I arrived. At least this way, we have the forces we need to counter his threat." Yalara was silent for a long moment, weighing the implications. Finally, she nodded. "Prepare the proclamation. Full citizenship for any immigrant who serves in defense of the legitimate government, with land grants for those who distinguish themselves in battle." "A new Zalinthian legion," Emil mused, warming to the idea despite his initial reservations. "Bound by oath to the crown, rather than to noble houses or military hierarchies." "Exactly," I said. "Loyal to the institution, not to individual commanders who might be corrupted." The plan moved forward with remarkable speed. Within days, recruitment centers had been established in immigrant quarters throughout the capital and floating city. The response exceeded even our most optimistic projections. Thousands volunteering, many with valuable skills and experience from conflicts on their homeworlds. I found myself unexpectedly central to the effort, as the immigrants related more easily to me than to Zalinthian officials. I spent long hours in the training camps that sprang up on the palace grounds, working with the diverse group of beings who would form the core of our new defense force. It was exhausting, challenging work, but also deeply satisfying. For the first time since arriving on Zalinthia, I felt truly useful, applying my problem-solving skills to immediate, practical concerns, rather than abstract political considerations. Yalara supported the initiative fully, making frequent visits to the training camps, speaking directly with volunteers, ensuring they had the resources they needed. I watched her move among them, gracious, attentive, genuinely interested in their stories and concerns, and felt a growing admiration that went beyond political alliance. "You're good at this," I told her one evening as we returned from the camps. "Connecting with people, making them feel valued." She smiled, the expression warming her silver eyes. "As are you. They respond to you differently than to me, not with deference, but with a kind of camaraderie. It is something I have rarely experienced." "The burden of royalty," I suggested. "They see the crown before they see the person." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "With you, I am sometimes able to forget it as well, to be simply Yalara, not the princess." There was something in her voice, a vulnerability I hadn't heard before. I realized with sudden clarity that despite our unusual beginning, despite the political calculations that had brought us together, something genuine had developed between us, a partnership based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Before I could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the palace, the emergency signal for an imminent attack. We rushed to the command center, where Emil was already coordinating the response. "Report!" Yalara commanded as we entered. Emil looked up from a holographic display showing the palace and surrounding areas. "Valen has made his move. Multiple attack points at the main gates and service entrances. They're using stolen Royal Guard identification codes to bypass outer security measures." I moved to his side, studying the tactical display. "How many?" "At least 300 fighters at each gate, well-armed and moving with military precision." He highlighted several areas on the display. "They've also taken control of these surface installations, primary power distribution nodes for the floating city. They're trying to cut us off," I realized. "Isolate the palace from potential reinforcements." "The immigrants," Yalara said, concern evident in her voice. "The training camps are outside the inner security perimeter." Emil nodded grimly. "Valen's forces have already moved to encircle them. They're caught in the open." My stomach dropped. Thousands of volunteers, beings who had trusted us, who had stepped forward to defend a world not their own, were now in immediate danger, with minimal training and incomplete equipment. "We need to get them inside the palace shields," I insisted. "They're sitting targets out there." "The inner gates are already under attack," Emil countered. "Opening them would risk the entire palace." "If we abandon them, we lose not only our defense force but any moral authority to lead," Yalara said firmly. "We must create a corridor for their evacuation." Emil hesitated, then nodded. "I'll divert forces to the eastern gate. It's the least heavily engaged at present." "Not enough," I said, an idea forming. "We need a diversion, something to draw Valen's attention away from the east." "What do you suggest?" Yalara asked. I pointed to a section of the tactical display. "The Royal Hangar. If we launched all available aircraft, made it look like we were attempting a mass evacuation to the south, while actually moving our people in from the east," Emil finished, nodding slowly. "It could work, but whoever leads that diversion will be at extreme risk." "I'll do it," I said without hesitation. "I've had basic flight training as part of my engineering certification." "Absolutely not," Yalara objected immediately. "You are Prince Consort. Your place is here, protected." "My place is wherever I can be most useful," I countered. "And right now, that's leading this diversion. I know those volunteers personally. They trusted me. I won't abandon them." A tense silence followed, as Yalara visibly struggled with the decision. Finally, she nodded once, her expression resolute but fearful. "Be careful," she said softly. "Return to me." "Always," I promised, though we both knew it was a promise I might not be able to keep. The plan came together with remarkable speed. while Emil coordinated the defensive positions at the eastern gate. I gathered a small team of pilots from the Royal Guard, those few who had demonstrated absolute loyalty during Korvax's coup attempt. We rushed to the hangar, where a dozen sleek Zalinthian aircraft waited, their iridescent hulls gleaming under the emergency lights. "Remember, the goal is to be seen, to draw their fire and attention," I briefed the pilots. "Evasive maneuvers only. This is not an attack run." They acknowledged the orders, their expressions a mix of determination and concern. I couldn't blame them. We were deliberately making ourselves targets for enemy fire. I took the lead craft, familiarizing myself with the controls as quickly as possible. Zalinthian technology was different from Earth designs, but the basic principles were similar enough. Thrust, lift, directional control. The physics didn't change, even if the implementation did. "All craft, prepare for synchronized launch," I ordered through the communication system. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." We shot from the hangar in tight formation, accelerating hard toward the southern perimeter of the palace grounds. Almost immediately, alarm signals flashed on my control panel as enemy weapon systems locked onto our aircraft. "Evasive pattern Alpha," I called, and the squadron broke apart, each craft following a pre-planned zigzag path designed to make targeting difficult. The sky lit up with energy weapons fire, bolts of sizzling plasma streaking past my viewport. The diversion was working. I could see enemy units redeploying, focusing fire upward, attention diverted from the eastern gate. On my tactical display, a green indicator flashed, signaling that the evacuation corridor was open. "Movement at the training camps," one of the pilots reported. "Our people are on the move." I allowed myself a moment of relief before a direct hit rocked my aircraft. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as systems began to fail. "Lead craft hit," someone shouted over the comm system. "Alex, get out of there." I struggled with the controls, trying to maintain altitude as the craft began to spin. The palace grounds whirled below me, a dizzying panorama of gardens and fortifications. Through the chaos, I glimpsed a stream of diverse figures rushing toward the eastern gate, the volunteers making their escape. It was working. They would make it to safety. The thought had barely formed when another hit tore through my starboard engine. The craft lurched violently, then began to plummet. Emergency systems engaged automatically, a containment field forming around the cockpit as the aircraft broke apart around me. The last thing I remembered was the ground rushing up to meet me, and a strange sense of peace knowing that I had accomplished my mission. I awoke to pain and darkness. For a moment, I thought I might be dead, but the throbbing in my head and the sharp ache in my ribs suggested otherwise. The dead presumably didn't hurt this much. Gradually, my eyes adjusted to the dim light. I was in a small, bare room with stone walls, nothing like the crystal and light construction of the palace. A cell. Then, I had survived the crash only to be captured by Valen's forces. I took inventory of my injuries: probable concussion, bruised or broken ribs, numerous cuts and contusions, painful, but not life-threatening. My Zalinthian attire had been replaced with simple clothes made of rough fabric, and my translator implant had been removed, leaving an aching void behind my ear. The door, a solid metal affair with no visible handle on my side, scraped open, and a figure entered. In the poor light, it took me a moment to recognize Chancellor Valen, looking more haggard than I remembered but no less imperious. He spoke, but without my translator. His words were incomprehensible, musical tones and clicks that my human ears could hear, but my brain couldn't process. Seeming to realize the problem, he produced a small device and activated it. A mechanical voice, flat and emotionless, translated his words into stilted English. "The alien consort awakens. How fortunate. You will be useful in negotiations." "Hostage diplomacy," I rasped, my throat dry. "Classy. Your primitive concepts do not apply." The translator rendered his response. You are a bargaining piece, nothing more. The princess must abdicate in favor of a suitable Zalinthian ruler. In exchange, you will be returned to your own kind. I laughed, which sent spikes of pain through my ribs. If you think Yalara will give up her throne for me, you've seriously misunderstood our relationship. Valen made a gesture that the translator didn't interpret. Your marriage was political. Your value is political. Do not delude yourself otherwise. Despite his cold confidence, I detected uncertainty in his demeanor. Something wasn't going according to plan. How's your coup going? I asked, pushing myself into a sitting position despite the pain. Successfully taken the palace yet? A flicker of annoyance crossed his features. Temporary setbacks. The princess's use of alien mercenaries was unexpected, a desperate measure that only confirms her unfitness to rule. Those mercenaries are people who chose to fight for a leader they believe in, I countered. Something you wouldn't understand. Aliens cannot comprehend Zalinthian interests, he snapped. Our civilization has stood for 20,000 years, precisely because we have maintained our purity, our independence. And yet here you are, failing to overthrow your own government, talking to an alien prisoner because you have no better options. I smiled, despite the pain. Seems like your traditional methods aren't working out so well. Valen's skin darkened with what I assumed was anger. You will record a message for the princess. You will plead for your life and urge her to accept our terms. Not happening, I said flatly. I knew the risks when I took on this role. Yalara knows I would never ask her to sacrifice her people's future for my safety. He studied me with those cold eyes. You may reconsider after experiencing Zalinthian interrogation techniques. Do your worst, I challenged, with more bravado than I actually felt. But remember, I'm more valuable alive and well than damaged or dead. A calculating look crossed his face. Perhaps physical persuasion is unnecessary. There are other methods. He moved to the door and spoke to someone outside, then turned back to me. You will have a visitor shortly, someone who may change your perspective. With that cryptic remark, he departed, leaving me alone with my pain and growing apprehension. Time passed, though how much was difficult to say, without any natural light or timepieces. I used the opportunity to explore my cell more thoroughly, looking for anything that might serve as a tool or weapon. There was nothing, not even a bed, just a thin mat on the floor and a basic sanitation unit in the corner. Eventually, the door opened again, and a hooded figure entered. They moved cautiously, checking the corridor behind them before securing the door. When they turned and lowered their hood, I was shocked to see a familiar face. Taven? I gasped. The young servant who had betrayed us, who had spied for Korvax, stood before me, looking nervous but determined. Be quiet, he hissed in surprisingly good English. They may be monitoring. You're working for Valen now, I asked, keeping my voice low but unable to hide my bitterness. Traded one master for another? He shook his head. I never worked for Korvax or Valen. I served the princess. Always have. I stared at him in confusion. You were spying on us. We found your transmitter. Yes, he admitted. Sending information to the princess's secure network. Information she needed, but could not request openly. He moved closer, speaking urgently. I was placed in your service by the princess herself, before you even arrived on Zalinthia. My role was to gather intelligence on the court's reaction to you, to identify threats before they materialized. That doesn't make sense, I objected. Why would she need to spy on her own household? Because she could trust no one, not even her brother at first. The plots against her began long before your arrival. Alex. She needed eyes and ears everywhere, especially close to you, the most visible symbol of her new policies. My mind raced, trying to reconcile this new information with what I thought I knew. Then why did you run when we found the transmitter? Because my usefulness in the palace was at an end. I needed to continue my work elsewhere. His expression grew serious. The princess instructed me to infiltrate Valen's organization if our security was ever compromised. When you discovered the transmitter, it provided the perfect opportunity. It was an extraordinary claim, but it explained certain inconsistencies I had noticed. How Yalara always seemed one step ahead of her opponents. How she had anticipated moves that should have surprised her. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "If you're undercover—" "Because the final stage of the plan is in motion," he interrupted. "The princess is not negotiating for your release, Alex. She is preparing to attack this compound with her full forces." The news both relieved and alarmed me. "When?" "Tonight. The assault begins at third moonrise." He pressed something small and cold into my palm. "This will neutralize the security field on the door when the time comes. Be ready to move quickly." I closed my fingers around the device, a small electronic key of some kind. "Taven, if you're lying to me again—" "I'm not," he said simply. "The princess sent a message for you. The stars align as predicted. She said you would understand." The phrase from our first meeting. A private signal that this truly came from Yalara. I nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good. I must go before I am missed." He pulled his hood back up. "Third moonrise. Be ready." After he left, I carefully concealed the key in a tear I made in the mat. Then tried to rest, gathering strength for whatever would come. Despite my injuries and the uncertainty ahead, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. If Yalara was mounting a rescue, I needed to be prepared to help however I could. I must have dozed off, because I awoke suddenly to the distant sound of explosions. The attack had begun. I retrieved the key and moved to the door, pressing it against the lock mechanism as Taven had indicated. There was a soft click, and the door shifted slightly, now unlocked. I paused, listening for guards in the corridor, but heard only more distant explosions and what sounded like energy weapons fire. Cautiously, I pushed the door open and peered out. The hallway was empty. The guards presumably called away to defend against the attack, moving as quickly as my injuries allowed. I made my way down the corridor, searching for an exit. The compound appeared to be a repurposed mining facility, with rough-hewn stone passages and minimal lighting. Without my translator implant, I couldn't read the Zalinthian signage, forcing me to navigate by instinct and the sounds of battle. I had just rounded a corner when I came face to face with a group of Valen soldiers. They raised their weapons, shouting what were obviously commands to surrender. Unarmed and injured, I had no choice but to comply, raising my hands slowly. Their leader approached, weapon trained on my chest, and spoke into a communication device. Whatever response he received caused visible alarm among the group. They began arguing among themselves, clearly divided on what to do with me. Taking advantage of their distraction, I backed slowly toward a side passage I had noticed. One of them spotted my movement and shouted, but before they could react, the wall behind them exploded inward in a shower of stone and dust. Through the breach stepped armed figures in mismatched armor, the immigrant volunteers, now a fighting force. They engaged Valen's soldiers with surprising coordination, driving them back with concentrated fire. One of the volunteers, a tall insectoid being I recognized from the training camps, spotted me and called out in broken English, "Prince Consort, this way!" I didn't need to be told twice. I stumbled toward the breach, where more volunteers waited to escort me to safety. They moved with professional discipline, creating a protective formation around me as we withdrew from the compound into the night air. Outside, the battle was in full swing. The desert around the mining facility was illuminated by weapons fire and explosions. The three moons of Zalinthia casting multiple shadows across the chaos. In the distance, I could see Royal Guard aircraft strafing enemy positions, while ground forces engaged in fierce combat at multiple points. My escort rushed me toward a waiting transport, a heavily armored vehicle designed for evacuating wounded. Inside, medical personnel immediately began treating my injuries, administering painkillers and regenerative compounds that quickly dulled the worst of my discomfort. "The princess?" I asked one of the medics, a Zalinthian with medical insignia on her uniform. "Where is she?" The medic hesitated, then pointed toward the front of the transport. "Commanding the assault from the forward position. Against all advice," she added disapprovingly. That sounded like Yalara. As soon as the medics had stabilized my condition, I insisted on being taken to her position. They objected strenuously, but I pulled rank, one of the few times I had deliberately used my status as prince consort to override medical authority. The forward command post was a hastily established perimeter just beyond the range of the mining compound's defensive weapons. Officers and communication specialists huddled around tactical displays, coordinating the various elements of the assault. And there, in the center of it all, was Yalara, still in formal court attire, but now augmented with light armor, directing the battle with calm authority. She looked up as I approached, her silver eyes widening in surprise and relief. For a moment, the princess facade dropped, and she rushed forward to embrace me, heedless of the officers watching. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "When your aircraft went down." "Takes more than a crash to get rid of me," I assured her, wincing slightly as her embrace pressed against my injured ribs. "Taven found me. He told me everything." She pulled back, searching my face. "You know, then, about his true role? That he was your spy all along?" "Yeah, that was a surprise." I glanced around at the battle raging nearby. "Maybe we can discuss your trust issues later. Looks like you're in the middle of something." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "As usual, your timing is impeccable. We have Valen cornered in the central control room. He's threatening to detonate explosives placed throughout the compound if we don't withdraw." "Bluffing?" I asked. "Possibly. But we cannot take the risk. There are still innocent workers trapped inside." I thought for a moment. The compound's a converted mining facility, right? There might be secondary access points, maintenance tunnels, emergency exits. "We've identified several, but they're all heavily guarded," an officer interjected, bringing up a schematic on the nearest display. I studied it, recognizing certain elements from similar facilities on Earth. "This section here, it looks like an old ventilation system. Probably not on their security grid if it's decommissioned." Yalara leaned in, examining the area I indicated. "It would require someone physically small to navigate those passages." "Or a remote drone," I suggested. "Do we have anything like that available?" One of the technical officers spoke up. "The survey unit has atmospheric sampling drones. They're not designed for combat, but they could navigate those spaces." "And they have visual feeds?" I asked. "Yes, full spectrum." "Get them," I ordered. "If we can get eyes on Valen's position, maybe see what he's really got in terms of explosives, we can plan a more targeted approach." While the drones were being prepared, Yalara pulled me aside. "You should be in medical, not planning assault tactics." "I'll go back to being injured after we deal with Valen," I promised. "Right now, you need every brain you can get, and I happen to know a thing or two about mining infrastructure." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Very well, but after this is resolved, you will submit to proper medical treatment. That is an order from your princess." "Yes, ma'am," I agreed with a mock salute. The drones arrived, tiny spherical devices no larger than my fist, equipped with advanced sensors and near-silent propulsion systems. The technical team programmed them with the ventilation system route, and we watched on monitors as they entered the compound through a concealed access point. The journey through the ancient ventilation shafts was tense, the drone operators carefully navigating past obstacles and structural damage. Finally, one of the drones emerged into a larger space, the central control room, where Valen and his remaining loyal followers had barricaded themselves. The visual feed showed Valen pacing nervously, shouting at his subordinates, without audio or a translator. I couldn't understand what he was saying, but his agitation was clear. More importantly, I could see the explosive devices he had threatened to detonate, and they appeared to be genuine. There. I pointed to a section of the room where several containers were wired to what looked like a central detonator. Those are real explosives, and enough of them to bring down the entire facility. Yalara's expression hardened. Then direct assault is not an option. No, I agreed. But look at the detonator setup. It's manual. Someone has to physically activate it. There's no remote trigger visible. Meaning Valen himself must be the one to detonate, she concluded. A final act of defiance if his position becomes untenable. I nodded. Classic suicide bomber mentality. He's convinced himself it's better to die a martyr than face defeat. Then we must give him a third option, Yalara decided. One that appeals to his sense of self-preservation. She turned to her communications officer. Establish a direct link to the control room. I wish to speak with the Chancellor. Within minutes, a holographic projection of Valen appeared before us, his image flickering slightly, but his disdain coming through clearly, even without words. Yalara spoke, and this time I understood her. Someone had provided me with a temporary translator device. Chancellor Valen, this conflict has gone on long enough. Your forces are defeated. Your supporters captured or fled. Only you remain. And I hold the power to end it all. Valen replied through the translator. One gesture from me, and this entire facility becomes a crater, along with all your precious alien soldiers inside it. To what end? Yalara asked calmly. Your death accomplishes nothing. The policies you oppose will continue. The changes you fear will accelerate. You will be remembered only as a terrorist who murdered innocents. I will be remembered as a patriot who refused to surrender our heritage to alien pollution, he spat. Is that truly how you wish your legacy to be written? She countered. Chancellor Valen, architect of Zelinthia's diplomatic corps for 3 decades, reduced to a footnote as a failed rebel. I could see her words finding their mark. Valen's pride was his weakness. The thought of being dismissed by history clearly troubled him. What alternative do you offer? He finally asked. Imprisonment? Execution? Neither is acceptable. Exile, Yalara proposed. To the outer colonies, far from the central worlds. You will live in comfort, with full access to your personal assets. Your name will be removed from the records of this conflict. Your earlier service to the crown acknowledged and honored. It was a generous offer, more generous than I would have made in her position. But I understood the strategy. Valen's death would only martyr him to his supporters. His quiet disappearance from public life would be far more effective in neutralizing the movement he represented. Valen was silent for a long moment, visibly calculating his options. Finally, he spoke. I require certain guarantees. Written assurances of my treatment and eventual rehabilitation. You will have them, Yalara promised. But first, you must surrender the detonator and allow our forces to secure the explosives. More negotiation followed. Detailed terms of surrender, specific guarantees of treatment, protocols for the transfer of power within the bureaucracy Valen had controlled. Throughout it all, Yalara remained patient and composed, making concessions on points that didn't matter while holding firm on those that did. In the end, Valen surrendered. Special units entered the control room, secured the explosives, and took the Chancellor into custody, not as a criminal, but as a dignitary being escorted to a new posting. The fiction would be maintained publicly, preserving his pride while removing him from any position of influence. As dawn broke over the desert, casting long shadows across the battlefield, Yalara and I watched from the command post as the last of our forces withdrew from the compound. It's over, she said quietly. Truly over this time. Korvax defeated. Valen neutralized. I agreed. The two biggest threats to your rule. To our rule, she corrected, taking my hand. You have earned your place at my side, Alex Tran. Not as a political symbol, but as a true partner in governance. The sentiment warmed me, but I couldn't help noticing the exhaustion in her voice, the strain of the past days visible in her posture. You should rest. The cleanup can wait a few hours. She shook her head. There is too much to do. The wounded must be tended, the dead honored, the people reassured that their government stands strong. And all of that will happen, I assured her. But you need to be at your best to lead those efforts. A few hours of rest isn't an indulgence. It's a strategic necessity. A small smile touched her lips. When did you become so wise in matters of state? I've had an excellent teacher, I replied, returning her smile. As we prepared to return to the palace, one of the immigrant volunteers approached, a young female of a species I didn't recognize, with blue-scaled skin and 4 arms. She bowed deeply to Yalara, then turned to me. Prince Consort, she said in careful English. The Combined Volunteer Corps wishes to formally pledge its continued service to the Crown. If you and the Princess will have us, we stand ready to form a permanent Zelinthian Legion, open to all who would serve regardless of origin. I looked to Yalara, who nodded her approval. The Crown accepts your pledge with gratitude, I replied formally. Your courage and loyalty will be remembered as long as Zelinthia stands. The volunteer beamed with pride, bowed again, and returned to her unit. I watched her go, struck by the significance of the moment. What had begun as a desperate measure, arming immigrants to defend against an immediate threat, had transformed into something far more profound, the foundation of a truly integrated society. You're thinking very loudly, Yalara observed, as we boarded the royal transport for the journey back to the palace. Just contemplating unexpected outcomes, I said. When you arranged for me to get that parking ticket back on New Terra, did you ever imagine it would lead to all this? She laughed, a genuine sound of amusement I had rarely heard from her. The celestial signs indicated significant change, but even I could not have predicted the specific path we would travel. As the transport lifted off, giving us an aerial view of the battlefield and the desert beyond, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. A debt, a chance encounter, a hasty marriage, all leading to revolution, war, and the transformation of an entire society. What happens now? I asked, as the palace came into view, its crystal structures catching the light of the rising suns. After we've recovered, Now, we build, Yalara replied, her silver eyes bright with purpose. We build a new Zelinthia, one that honors our heritage while embracing a more connected future. One where talent and loyalty matter more than origin or bloodline. That won't happen overnight, I cautioned. There will be resistance, setbacks. Of course, she agreed. All worthwhile change requires time and persistence. But we have made a beginning, and we have something our predecessors lacked. What's that? She smiled, taking my hand again. A partnership of different perspectives, different strengths. Neither of us could have succeeded alone. Alex. It was only together, Zelinthian and human, tradition and innovation, that we prevailed. There was truth in that. I realized. My Earth perspective had provided insights that would never have occurred to a Zelinthian, while Yalara's deep understanding of her culture and people had guided those insights into effective action. Partners, then, I said, returning her smile. In governance and in life. In governance and in life, she echoed, sealing the promise with a gesture that needed no translation. As we approached the palace, I saw crowds gathering below, citizens of all species waiting to welcome their princess home. Among them were the newly formed Zelinthian Legion, standing at attention in their mismatched armor, a visible symbol of the changes already taking place. The sight filled me with both pride and humility. I had come to this world as a stranger, drawn into its politics through a series of unlikely events. Now I was helping to shape its future, for better or worse. The royal transport began its descent toward the palace landing pad, where court officials waited to receive us. I straightened my posture, ignoring the pain from my injuries, and prepared to step back into my role as prince consort. But as I moved to follow protocol, Yalara stopped me with a gentle touch. "Before we return to our duties," she said softly, "I want to thank you, Alex Tran, not as my consort or political ally, but as the person who showed me that different doesn't mean lesser, that strength can come from the most unexpected sources." "I should be thanking you," I replied. "You gave me purpose when all I had was debt, a chance to be part of something greater than myself." "Then we are both fortunate," she said, her eyes shining with an emotion I was only beginning to understand. "And Zalinthia is fortunate as well." With that, we descended from the transport side by side, ready to face whatever challenges awaited us in the days and years ahead. The path would not be easy. Entrenched interests would resist. Old prejudices would persist. New threats would emerge. But for the first time, I truly believed we could succeed. After all, who would have thought that a parking ticket could lead to revolution? Sometimes, the smallest beginnings yield the most profound changes. And sometimes, the most unlikely partnerships prove the most enduring. My name is Alex Tran. I married an alien princess to pay off a parking ticket, and ended up leading a rebellion that transformed an entire civilization. Not bad for an engineer who just wanted to fix air scrubbers. But my story, our story, is far from over. It's only just beginning.